jungle.
Hello, you are listening to Trump Republic Radio. It is March 25th, 2018. I'm your host, Enzo Quesada, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Bobby Hester.
Hello, everyone.
And this week's episode is going to be the last time me and Bobby are in the same room to do the show for a couple months now. I'm going to be moving to Missouri for a little bit. But I guess we got to do the best we can with what we got left here, and we got some stuff to talk about today, Bobby.
Yeah, this has not been a very good week at all for the Trump
Very
administration.
bad week. We might as well just get into it, though, and start off with the little omnibus bill that happened this week.
Yeah, so President Trump on Friday signed the $1.3 trillion omnibus spending bill after earlier threatening to veto it but signing it reluctantly, saying he would, quote, never sign a bill like this again. By signing the bill, a government shutdown was avoided. The bill contains an $80 billion increase in defense spending and $1.6 billion to fight the opioid epidemic. No legislation regarding DACA was included. The current bill funds the government through the end of fiscal year 2018 at the end of September, meaning this entire issue will come around again right before the midterm elections. But, you know, that's not the only stuff that was in it, was there, Enzo?
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff it does. It funds Planned Parenthood. It sends more taxpayer dollars to Israel, about, I think $1.3 billion it does. It provides border protections for Tunisia, Jordan, Lebanon, Egypt. Not so much us. What it does, Trump tried to make it seem better that it has like this border protection funding or whatever to the tune of $1.6 billion, but that's only going to be spent on repairing current and existing fences and expanding fencing, not wall, fencing by 33 miles. They're going to do that in San Diego and the Rio Grande Valley. The bill also does this thing with the fixed NICS. Do you know anything about that?
I've heard of the term, but I didn't really look into it very much.
John Cornyn, our senator here in Texas, was the one behind that. It kind of works to have better enforce background checks on guns.
Okay.
They also with this bill commissioned a new study on treating gun violence as an epidemic. So, you know, down the line, that's probably going to be used against us, what the CDC finds on that as far as guns is concerned, treating it as a mental illness. But, yeah, you know, it doesn't defund sanctuary cities whatsoever.
Nope.
They get to keep all their budget. Betsy Voss was trying to do some stuff as far as with education for school choice. None of that is in the bill whatsoever. Yeah, the military's expanded a ton. We don't necessarily need it, but we do have a pay increase for the troops. Which
has been desperately needed for years now.
I believe it's 2.4% pay increase, which is the largest since 2010. So I guess that's good, but they don't need this much money for the military. You know, for our military, spend more than the next 10 countries combined on military spending. It's ridiculous to think that we need more of this stuff. But that's the excuse Trump said. We have to fund the military, so that's why I signed the bill. But I am extremely frustrated with the bill. Not much of any good came from it, and a lot of bad came from it. I know Chuck Schumer has said that this is a good win for them, that they're actually getting to do more stuff now in the minority rule than in the majority rule. Pelosi said that this was a win for them. You know, as far as like procedures and how you do things like this, they only gave them what 2 days to
Less
look at
than
the
2 days.
I believe it was 18 hours they got.
It was more than 1 day. It was like 36 hours or something like that.
Something ridiculously short though for a
2,200 page bill.
And on average, every single page is over $500 million of spending, every single one of them, and you can't look through all of that in the time given to you. I don't know, every single bad person in Congress voted on this, and Trump enabled them. He didn't need to do this.
And you know, what people need to remember about this bill is this is not a budget bill. This is a spending bill. This isn't a bill that says we're going to take in this much money and we're going to spend this much. Here's how we're going to balance it out. No, this is approval of spending for a bunch of different stuff. So for anyone calling it a budget, it's not a budget. It's literal spending, not regarding anything coming in. It's, you know, one of the biggest reasons why you have now a $21 trillion deficit is because of things like this.
Yeah, this also increases the deficit by nearly $1 trillion.
Yeah, so that's not good at all. However, there is one small thing that is good about the bill, probably the only thing that's actually good about the bill, and that is that hidden away in it, there's a possibility that wall construction money and OIG funding is actually in there, plain as day. And that is that the $80 billion in defense spending that is discretionary can be spent at will at the discretion of the president. Now, this was money that was being given to the Army Corps of Engineers directly through the bill. And it says that rumors are actually beginning to spread that President Trump is going to order the Army Corps of Engineers to build the wall and use that money to pay for it. Trump himself even tweeted on the same day or a day before signing the bill, or right after the bill, the same time period, said, quote, "Because of the $700 and $716 billion gotten to rebuild our military, many jobs are created and our military is again rich. Building a great border wall with drugs, in parentheses, poison, and enemy combatants pouring into our country is all about national defense. Build wall through military." Now, that's very interesting that Trump says that because, as we all know, Trump puts his tweets out there for a reason. He suggests things in his tweets for a reason. He puts things together. And I think that would be interesting because the way that it works is as long as the president deems something a matter of national security, he can order the Army Corps of Engineers to build whatever they want. I mean, they just got like $316 million to fix some dams up in Oregon. You know, so it's not like they're not there to build things. The bill lays it out that this is money that can be used specifically for construction, for whatever they're told to put it towards. So that would be one way that they could actually do that without Congress being able to stop them.
Yeah.
Which, you know, like I said, that's plain as day. And there's also been some leaks coming around that people, you know, have been talking about the fact that there was some tweets from QAnon that were saying Red Castle, Green Castle, and the fact that the Army Corps of Engineers, their logo is a red castle, and their headquarters is in a city called Green Castle. And this was tweeted about, you know, several days before the omnibus spending bill was even released. So there is some legitimacy to the claim that this might actually be the way that they're going. If that's the case, and everything else is funded, but you can get more than enough money for the wall, I still wouldn't go for it because it funds a lot of stuff we don't like. However, that tidbit is something that's good if they actually go that route, which I can see them doing. It's one of those things we'll just have to wait and see. However, also included is over $315 million in extra funds for the Office of the Inspector General, which will be used for large investigations and prosecutions after the IG report drops sometime soon. Page 595 of the bill also specifically states that, quote, "No funds in this act shall be used to deny any Inspector General funded under this act timely access to any records, documents, or other materials to the department or agency over which the IG has responsibilities to prevent access to records." Meaning that once the IG report drops and they start going after these people, they can't use any of the money that they just got through this bill to stop them from it being investigated.
Yeah. Also, one thing that just came to mind while thinking about this bill is it also handicaps immigration enforcement in terms of ICE agents. Now, they requested 1,000 new ICE agents. They're going to give them 100 support officers.
Mm-hmm. It's not field agents.
Yeah, they're not field agents. And they also requested more detention space, and they actually saw a slight reduction. And they're already, past capacity for what they need. So with the signing of this bill, there's just going to be more catch and release.
Mm-hmm.
There's no other way around this. So, you want to be forgiving for Trump. Maybe this isn't the worst thing of all time, but, ICE enforcement is going to be down until September, and having the possibility of him building the wall, if he doesn't do it, I mean, it's not a good trade-off. There's other ways that we could have went about this. It's I don't know. I'm not proud of President Trump at all this week.
No. I will say one thing, though, and that is that, I want to say the whole, if he keeps his promise, which, for the most part he has, for a lot of things he hasn't, but if he does keep his promise to, quote, never sign a bill like this again, and then the thing comes up in September right before the midterms, and people are arguing over spending right before the midterms, that's going to have a significant impact, especially if Democrats realize they can't get funding for stuff like this a second time around. So, congratulations to them. They won this round as far as I'm concerned.
It's just so crazy for me. Why did he even mention, I'm actually considering vetoing this on immigration? Why don't you just do that if you're going to say that? What's the point of just saying that and then passing it?
I was shocked, actually. I thought he was going to veto it. I honestly did. And then he came out and said, you know what? I was thinking about it. I'll just sign it.
I didn't vote for the guy to give more money to the military. He is in the place where he is because he's a hardliner on immigration. And he is in an opportunity where he can take a hardline stance for immigration, and he decides not to do it, to the behest of everyone that voted for him. And, the actual conservatives in the Republican Party were all against this. Mm-hmm. Every single member of the Freedom House caucus voted against this bill, but he still signs it. It's, this is the swamp in full effect. There's a ton of pork barrel spending in the bill, and it's not good stuff.
At least if you're going to have pork barrel spending, put it towards stuff that we like, Anyways, are you ready to move on to the next story?
Yeah, let's move on.
Which is also not a very good story. But this next story is that Trump has finally replaced McMaster with John Bolton. President Trump has announced that his national security advisor, Army Lieutenant General H.R. McMaster, will be replaced by former U.S. Ambassador to the UN, John Bolton. He will officially replace him on April 9th. Bolton was a long supporter of the Iraq War and told Sky News, quote, I think the surest way to avoid conflict is to have a strong military capability. As the ancient Romans used to say, sivi pacem parabellum. If you want peace, prepare for war. The move drew mixed reactions from Trump supporters who are happy to see the exit of McMaster, but cautious and strongly against Bolton filling the position. It pretty much describes it exactly how I would say it. Happy to see McMaster gone, not happy at all to see Bolton filling that position.
Yeah, if you remember back, before Trump got in office, a lot of people thought that Michael Bolton was going to be the Secretary of... John Bolton. Michael Bolton's someone else, isn't it?
I don't know.
John Bolton was going to be Secretary of State, so he's been someone in their eyes eyeing a place in the administration for a while. John Bolton is someone that got us into the Iraq War.
He was a cheerleader for it.
He's someone that still supports us going to war in Iraq. He wants us to go to war with Iran. He wants us to go to war with North Korea. That doesn't really make me feel safe in any sort of way by having some warmonger who wants to go to war in, the position of national security. And, with giving the military all this extra money, I don't want to put someone like John Bolton who wants to use that all in a position to have influence in doing so. So, this is also a very bad move. Trump campaigning us not going to war, and putting John Bolton in there isn't a good sign towards the future of not going to war. He is someone that believes in maintaining American global homogeny through violence, and that's not something that we support at all.
No, definitely not. All I will say is, Trump does like having people around him that have opposing viewpoints, and it's possible that, as people like to say, Trump doesn't keep people around any longer than he actually needs them for. So, McMaster was in there to mainly deal with the ISIS situation, and that has been mainly dealt with. So, is he bringing John Bolton in because of preparations for something else? I don't know.
My
but in
positive
general,
outlook.
I hate the.
My positive outlook on this is seeing how long people last in the Trump administration. At least he'll probably leave soon.
Yeah, that's true.
So
at least he can go back to being an analyst on Fox News every day.
Yeah. Let's move on to the next story, though. Also a bad thing to come from the Trump administration this week, and that is that the Trump administration is looking to ban bump stocks. The Trump administration announced Friday that they will be banning bump stocks and all devices that turn otherwise legal guns into illegal machine guns. Attorney General Jeff Sessions announced that bump stocks fall within the definition of machine gun under federal law, meaning they allow the gun to fire more than one round and achieve a continuous firing cycle with a single pull of the trigger. The president has supported a ban on bump stocks ever since the Las Vegas shooting in October and after the recent school shooting in Parkland, Florida, despite criticism from the NRA and many conservatives and libertarians.
I think we could all see this one coming. I mean, he said he was going to do it, and he finally did it. Luckily enough, bump stocks, as we said before in previous episodes of the show and other people have talked about, they're not that popular among gun people, and they're really not used very often.
I've never seen one personally.
This is one of the equivalent of this is a Democratic person in a city trying to take down a Confederate statue. It's as you like to say, he can say, I did something for you. He say, look, see, people, I banned bump stocks.
It's
reality,
symbolic,
it do much.
But, I don't think Trump deserves to have the endorsement for the NRA going into 2020. It seems pretty obvious this guy doesn't care about protecting gun rights.
I mean, in every other regard,
he's not pushing towards, in the omnibus bill, we could have pushed towards national concealed carry reciprocity, and they didn't do that. Instead, they put the fix Nixon to expand background checks. So, I don't know. Another bad thing with the Trump administration doing this week doesn't make you hopeful in him defending your gun rights.
I'm not worried about the gun rights. I mean, this is pretty clearly a one-off thing. He's not like he's going to come out tomorrow and say, yep, we're going to ban AR-15s now. We know that's not going to happen. So, if anything, this is just symbolic, saying I did something for you. Nothing really is going to come from that. But the next story, however, is probably the good thing that happened this week.
Yeah, one of the few things that Trump did this week that was good, and that is the Trump administration has banned transgenders from the military. President Trump on Friday officially authorized the ability of the Pentagon to ban transgender individuals from joining the military, with a few limited exceptions, following through on a pledge he made last year. The DNC has already released a statement criticizing the ban, with some groups saying that there is more than 15,000 transgender troops in the military, disputing the number of 4,000 that is officially estimated.
So, I mean, this isn't really a campaign promise per se, but it is a follow-through with what he said last year. So, that's official now. Yeah, I don't really have anything else to say about that we haven't already said in past episodes.
Nancy Pelosi came out and said something along the lines of, and this is not the exact quote, but like anyone that is willing to, put themselves out there to defend the country should be allowed to. Which is not like a standard that we have for the military to begin with.
No, it's not.
Like, you can't have, bipolar disorder. You
can't have asthma.
Be overweight. Yeah, I have asthma. I can't qualify for the military. Why is putting, gender dysphoria on the list of disqualifying traits somehow mass discrimination? It is discrimination, and we're fine with that.
The military is not an equal opportunity employer. They can discriminate at will.
And I just, I was thinking about this last night. China doesn't have transgenders in their military.
No.
Russia doesn't have transgenders in their
Do
military.
they even have transgenders? I don't know.
They're not allowed to be public with it out there.
Yeah.
Especially in Russia. But, yeah, serious militaries don't have transgenders in their military. You look at through the entire course of history, okay, the Romans weren't defeating people because they had transgender commanders. it's crazy, and with the predisposition towards suicide that these people have, putting them in a stressful situation like a combat situation, it's not going to be the best for them. So, yeah, I'm pretty happy that we're banning transgenders from the military. Let's go on to the last thing that we have for the top news here this week, though, and that is Jeff Sessions is he's directing prosecutors to seek the death penalty for drug dealers.
Mm-hmm.
The exact quote he said this week, he said in a memo that because the opioid epidemic killed more than 64,000 Americans in 2016, we cannot continue with business as usual. Quote, to combat this deadly epidemic, federal prosecutors must consider every lawful tool at their disposal, Sessions wrote. This should also include the pursuit of capital punishment in appropriate cases. Congress has passed several statutes that provide the Justice Department with the ability to seek capital punishment for certain drug-related crimes. So, yeah, I'm fine with executing drug dealers to a degree. If they're selling fentanyl, they're pretty much murderers themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I support murdering drug dealers if they're selling harmful enough drugs. I don't think that we should be murdering people that sell marijuana.
And it doesn't seem like that's what they're going for. Like it said, inappropriate cases. So your average drug dealer on the street is not going to be someone that they're going to spend all his time and money trying to get the death penalty on you. They're saving that for big cases, big things, important things, people who have killed other people, not just your average Joe who sells a little weed on the side. So if you are one of those average Joes listening to this, to be honest, I mean, let's face it, you really don't have much to worry about that you don't already have to worry about. You don't have to worry about getting the death penalty on top of it. But it is good, I agree. I'm glad that we're going after these people, and I would like to see this going after pharmaceutical companies as well. Wouldn't mind seeing some of those executives up there on death row. But.
Yeah. Let's move on now to some stuff about Facebook.
So this was probably the biggest non-entirely political story of the week, and that was the whole Facebook and Cambridge Analytica
I didn't
scandal.
pay too much attention to this.
It was a lot more earlier in the week than later in the week,
Yeah.
But it was very, very important. I'll just go ahead and read this here. So this week Facebook landed in a big scandal with the data firm Cambridge Analytica over improper use of personal user data. Facebook had the data of 500 million Facebook users exposed to Cambridge. I'm sorry, not 500. 50 million Facebook users exposed to Cambridge Analytica without them knowing. A company called Global Science Research harvested the user data and sold it to Cambridge Analytica. It has since brought up larger issues of what Facebook should be doing to protect the private data of its users. The Federal Trade Commission has since begun probing Facebook over whether they violated the terms of a 2011 consent decree due to how the data was handed over to the firm. The 2011 consent decree meant that Facebook agreed to get user consent for certain changes to privacy settings after they deceived users and forced them to share more personal data than they intended. If the FTC, and this is the important part here, if the FTC finds that Facebook violated the terms of the consent decree, it has the power to fine the company more than $40,000 per day per violation.
And they have 500
So what's
or
that?
50 million.
50 million times 40,000 potentially.
That's
Per
gonna be
day,
billions
and
of
they've known about
dollars.
this for 2 years.
Yeah.
It's not that Facebook didn't know. This is part of the scandal, is the fact that they knew about this but didn't do anything regarding it. So you can only do the math there. That would completely bankrupt the company.
Yeah.
And who knows? I mean, it's unknown at this time, but it is possible that the users that had their data violated or sold without their consent, they could potentially receive some of that 40,000. I mean, I don't know for certain, but I can see that being at least a small possibility. So it's possible that if your data was leaked, if my data was leaked, if people who we know whose data was leaked, it's entirely possible that they might be getting a little paycheck here in the future, but it's unlikely. Continuing on the story, politicians across the U.S., such as New York State Attorney General Eric Schneiderman, Massachusetts Attorney General Maura Healey, and Connecticut Attorney General George Jepsen have all announced that they are probing Facebook as well. Senator Mark Warner of Virginia has also called upon Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg to appear before the Senate Intelligence Committee for testimony, while the UK Parliamentary Committee has requested Zuckerberg's appearance in London as well. Facebook stock has been in a free fall since news of the scandal began to break, with the stock price falling from 185 to 159 over the last week, a decline of 14%, which includes a 6.8% decline on Monday alone. It has dragged down the whole tech sector and the entire market as well. Zuckerberg, however, has remained invisible and with an unknown whereabouts over the last few days, but did release a statement to CNN in an attempt to begin damage control. Zuckerberg has had his own issues to deal with, however, because over the last 3 months, he has sold $210 million worth of Facebook stock in a possible case of insider trading. However, people have said that that is very unlikely to be the case. So, this is essentially where we're at right now. Zuckerberg is screwed. Facebook is screwed. Your data is screwed. Everyone's screwed, but at least now we know about it, and they're going after it. So, at least as of now, it appears that any hopes that Mark Zuckerberg had of a 2020 presidential run just got significantly downplayed and possibly stopped altogether.
Yeah, that was just the one thing that I was going to bring up. Now that Zuckerberg is pretty much just on the complete dark outs on it, I can't see this guy trying to run for president in 2020, which we've talked about in the program many times. The guy has the money to do it, but with these fines coming, maybe he won't even have the money to do that. So
I don't know. I mean, the one thing I could say is that over the last 3 months, him selling $210 million worth of Facebook stock is the largest sell-off dollar-wise and number of shares-wise of any insider in Facebook. They do believe, like I said, that it was unlikely that it's insider trading because a lot of these people have different stock plans that they're on that buy and sell at regular intervals. So that's why they don't think that this was any sort of insider trading. However, even though it seems like $210 million is a lot of money, Mark Zuckerberg's current amount of money that he has invested in Facebook, meaning his total amount of shares times the current share price, if he wanted to actually sell everything, he'd get about $64 billion out of it. So he's nowhere close to being bankrupt himself at all.
Yeah.
But other than that.
But his image, in a sense, could be.
I mean, Zuckerberg doesn't really have a positive influence. A positive image, even among like lefties. A lot of people on the left really don't like Mark Zuckerberg at all. So. Yeah, it doesn't help him, and I mean, there's rumors going around that he's even going to step down to CEO of Facebook. I don't know. We'll see what happens there. I doubt it, but it's definitely not something that's going to make people want to vote for him. I'll tell you that.
Let's move on now, though, to this self-driving car stuff.
So, a 49-year-old Arizona woman by the name of Elaine Herzberg was killed last Sunday afternoon when she was hit by an Uber car that was being autonomously driven. It is the first deadly accident that has occurred involving self-driving cars. Uber Technologies has since halted autonomous vehicle tests for an indefinite period of time. They were currently testing self-driving cars in Pittsburgh, San Francisco, Toronto, and the greater Phoenix area. So, for those of you who were worried about the possibility of self-driving cars and whether or not they, will they get in accidents, will they kill anyone, here's our first recorded instance of that actually happening. So, they've since halted testing of those, and I don't know, dude, I'm still worried about self-driving cars. I don't trust them, especially when other people on the road are still, human drivers who have the possibility of having, human brains that don't react the same way that computers might be programmed to react. So I should say that in the greater test of trying to make things like this, there are going to be accidents. Unfortunately, lives will be lost, and unfortunately, this woman, her life was lost. So, it's sad to hear that.
And these things, even when they refine the technology to where self-driving cars become, a commonplace thing, which I think will eventually get there.
I think so,
There's
too.
still going to be accidents. There's no way around that. But especially with these early accidents, it's going to hold back the public from ever getting behind self-driving cars. And personally, I mean, I own a car. I drive a car every day all the time. I don't mind doing that. It's something I enjoy doing. I wouldn't personally have a need to buy a self-driving car. I could understand the benefits if, you can go to sleep in a commute, but for what the cost would be to get into it, I wouldn't get involved with any sort of self-driving cars.
No, I wouldn't. So it's sad to hear that happening, but at this point, it's one of those things. What are you gonna do?
Yeah. You want to move on now to some immigration stuff?
Yes, let's go ahead and do it.
Open the door! Immigration!
La migra, vamos, niños!
This week in immigration.
So the first story that we have up in immigration segment is some of those illegals that dodged that ICE raid in Oakland. They've now been arrested again. So 3 of the illegal aliens who avoided capture last month after Oakland Mayor Libby Schaaf blew the whistle on an upcoming ICE raid have been rearrested on new crimes. One was a Mexican national arrested for robbery and gun crimes who was released back into the community in November despite having an ICE detainer. Another was a Mexican national arrested for a DUI despite having been deported 3 times and having prior convictions including another DUI and battery of a spouse. The third was also a Mexican national who was arrested for spousal injury despite being deported twice and having prior convictions including drug possession, a hit and run, DUIs, possession of narcotics equipment, and a parole violation. So not sending their best, are they, Enzo?
No, they're not. And these are the people that have to be defended.
Yeah.
This is, Libby Schaaf said that Oakland is stronger when families stay together. Can't break up these families of criminal aliens.
No, definitely. They are the hallmark of our community.
Yeah, people that beat their spouses and get you DUIs and do robberies. These are valuable members of the community, and deporting them would be a danger to the community.
It would be a human rights violation, as some of them like to say. So
this is the stuff that goes on, though, in California.
Unfortunately, it was only 3 of them that got arrested, but I guarantee you it's going to be a lot.
But they
more.
Estimated, when they did that raid in Oakland the week that Libby Schaaf announced it, I believe they got around 130 aliens.
It was about
But
that,
they
yeah.
say that there was around 800 that got away because of the announcement that they had planned on rolling up on. So, these are just 3 individuals with pretty egregious backgrounds. There's a lot more like them, and they're just running free.
Mm-hmm. But other than that, I guess we can go to the next story, which is also out of California, and this is one of the ones that was yours, so if you want to get it.
Yeah, Southern California town votes to reject sanctuary status. The Southern California city of Los Amelitos has voted 4-1 to opt out of the state law limiting cooperation with federal immigration agents after drawing attention earlier this month. The city council said that the new state law may be in direct conflict with federal laws and the Constitution, and the council therefore found that it was impossible to honor their oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States if they did not opt out of it. 2 more Southern California cities in Orange County, Aliso Viejo and Buena Park, including Orange County itself, are now thinking about defying the state in opting out of sanctuary status. So, I believe it was a month ago, California unilaterally declared sanctuary state status. It might have been 2 or 3.
It was a little over a month ago.
Yeah, over a month ago. They declared themselves a sanctuary state. The entire state has agreed that you won't cooperate with federal immigration officials. You can't ask someone you pull over their immigration status, stuff of that sorts. And here we have a little city in Southern California is defying the entire state that surrounds them. And they're not alone. They talk about, we can't honor this law and also support the Constitution. We've mentioned this many times on the show. There is a thing called the Supremacy Clause where, in the Constitution, things not delegated to the federal government is given to the states and the localities, but federal immigration law is a federal thing. This is not something that you can do independently, state by state basis. So, Yeah, good on them for doing it. I don't know how the state is going to react to them doing so. I feel like they'll probably get punished in some sort of fashion.
They will. And for those of you who aren't that familiar with Southern California, obviously the entire greater Los Angeles area is very, very blue. However, I'm not going to say there's a red area because it's becoming a lot more blue due to immigration and people moving out there. However, I would say the area that is the most red tends to be the Orange County area. In fact, Republicans actually have a couple of congressmen in the United States House of Representatives from that very same area that are in those districts. So those are some districts that still are Republican areas in the Los Angeles area. So it does make sense that this would happen in Orange County. And I think that as part of it, this might actually help save some of those seats from flipping blue potentially, because of the fact that is by the state becoming a sanctuary state and then these cities and the county and just the general area not really liking it, that's going to make the Republican voters there a lot more enthusiastic to show up. Because we do know that Democrats are very enthusiastic about showing up in these midterms this year. That's one thing that we do need to keep in mind and be very cautious about. But however, that can potentially get Republicans out to vote and might save us a couple of House seats. So
Yeah.
just thought about that as well.
With that said, we don't have any more immigration news. Let's go on to some 2018 election stuff. We're going to start off with the Tarkanian piece here.
Yeah, so now that Danny Tarkanian is running for the House, not the Senate, he's actually taken a huge lead in the polls. So a new survey taken by Strategic National shows that Danny Tarkanian has taken a commanding lead in the race for Nevada's 3rd Congressional District ever since dropping out of the Republican Senate primary. The polls show that Tarkanian is at 37%, with the next highest candidate, Michelle Mortensen, at just 10% and Scott Hammond at 9%. Also included was Victoria Seaman at 9%, however, she dropped out shortly after Tarkanian entered the race, meaning, by the time they conducted the poll and actually released the results, she had dropped out. However, 34% are still undecided. The poll also shows that Trump's approval among Republicans in that district is at 90%, including 72% who say they have an extremely favorable view of him. So, this is part of the thing that I said. I think that Tarkanian is easily going to win that district because it's a very pro-Trump district. It's a swing district, but it leans slightly Republican, even though Democrats did win it back in 2016 very, very narrowly. It's a district that has flipped back and forth between red and blue. So staying blue or staying red doesn't necessarily in that district mean anything for the rest of the country. However, Tarkanian is a very big Trump supporter. Trump has a lot of support in that district among Republicans there. So I think he'll easily win that primary, and he has the money and the support in the district and needs to actually win it in the general election, because the Democrat that had that district, he's the guy who's running for the Democrat primary for the Senate in Nevada. So that's an open district right now, and Republicans hope to actually win back one of those districts. So I think that has a very big possibility of happening.
Yeah, most definitely.
And I guess I'll move on to the next story unless you want to say anything else regarding Danny Tarkanian.
No, we can go into the next piece.
Yeah, so the next thing I want to say kind of has to do with, what I mentioned there regarding how Democrats do just in general, how Republicans do on the general ballot. And there's a new Fox News poll out that shows that the lead of Democrats over Republicans has dropped to only 5 points, 46 to 41, on the generic 2018 midterm ballot. This lead is a massive drop from the 15-point lead, 50 to 35, that Democrats had in the same Fox News poll that was conducted back in October. If history shows us anything, then this is actually good news for Republicans, because in March 2014, Democrats held a 2-point lead, 40 to 38, and Republicans were able to flip 13 House seats. In March 2010, Republicans held a 4-point lead, 42 to 38, and were able to flip 63 House seats. However, this poll does show that those who say they are, quote, enthusiastic about voting in the midterms favors Democrats by a massive margin, 60 to 33, while those who say they are feeling about the same favors Republicans, 48 to 38. It is also the first time since 2010 that less than half of the respondents, 47%, feel nervous about the economy, while 51% feel more optimistic about their finances, and 60% are more optimistic about their personal happiness. So this poll kind of has, some good news and some bad news to it. The good news is it does show that just in general, people are feeling better about what's going on in the country. In general, people are feeling better about their finances, which is very important things. However, it does show that that enthusiasm gap among Democrats is much, much, much more than it is among Republicans, and we cannot get complacent here. The left is going to show up in November, and if the right sits back, you're going to see Democrats win back the House if you're not careful. Anything, if the Democrats win back the House, that means one thing and one thing only. That means impeachment of Trump. They are going to do it. We know they're going to do it. So all these special elections where a Republican might lose here or lose there or win here or win there, it all matters when it comes down to it.
And we've seen, in terms of enthusiasm gaps, that's been the determining factor in most of these races that we've seen recently. Even going back to Donald Trump winning back in 2016. So it's as you said, they're going to introduce the articles of impeachment. I mean, they've already tried before, but they're going to try in a more serious fashion if they get the House immediately. And the level of obstruction you'd see if the Democrats won the House would be tremendous. All of the things that we tried to do with the Trump administration, all the experimenting would be over for the next 2 years.
And as bad as things are, like as bad as that omnibus budget was, we've still got a lot of things done over the last year. There are still a lot of good things that we know are coming in the future. You want to throw all that away just because you get pissed off at a couple of things that happen? No, you need to make sure you get out there and you need to make sure that you vote in November. And if you want to see the country just disseminate and disintegrate, vote left. So
let's move now on to some of the bottom of the national news stuff. And the first thing we're going to talk about is stuff that has been happening around us, the Austin bombing.
Yeah, so a string of 6 bombs hit the city of Austin, Texas this month, claiming the lives of 2 people and sending multiple others to the hospital with injuries. The bombs were disguised as packages that were mailed to different homes in the Austin area, causing a panic among Austinites and attendees of the South by Southwest Festival. The bombs were sent by Mark Condit, age 23, who was tracked by police to a hotel in Round Rock, Texas, and then followed onto the highway before being shot at by a SWAT team and blowing himself up. He left behind a 25-minute video describing the bombs in detail, but the video hasn't actually been released to the public as of now. Police also don't believe that the bomber had any political or religious motives for the attacks. Police were able to track him down because of his signature trait, which was some usual batteries that allowed investigators to quickly link the explosives together. Condit was seen on security video mailing the packages, and in one instance was even wearing a blonde wig and gloves. Police believe that there are no other package bombs sent by the bomber, although police found a list of more targets in his possession. So, we could have talked about this last week, because last week's kind of when the story, blew up, no pun intended. But, what do you think about the whole Austin bomber situation?
It's been interesting, because, we've been seeing this happening on our local news, and the level of fear that this has created has been tremendous. This has had huge shockwaves on the city of Austin. We also saw instances where a package blew up in San Antonio.
Yeah.
So all along, this I-35 corridor between Austin and San Antonio, which if you don't know the area, Austin and San Antonio is like a cohesive collective.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it sees itself kind of as a unit together.
And we're right in the middle of it.
Yeah, and we're right in the middle of it. We're equidistant to both cities, pretty much. It's crazy. And we still don't know any motives for why this happened. The guy blew himself up. Now, you have seen people trying to, point to this guy being homeschooled, and he grew up in, a religious family, so they want to blame him for that, but I think it's too early to, really ascribe any sort of motive to that.
It's if there is anything, it's probably in that 25-minute video that he recorded. But, like I said, they haven't released that yet. They did say that, they were concerned that there were more bombs out there, and I think they actually, if I remember, I think they found one. They found one of the ones that he had sent after they caught him, or before they caught him, I should say, but it didn't actually blow up. I'm not sure if that was if there's a true story or if that was fake news. And yeah, the one that happened in San Antonio, that was at a FedEx facility, because all the stuff gets shipped down there before being shipped out. So it happened to blow up when it was on the conveyor belt. So as bad as that is, thankfully it wasn't able to get to its destination before blowing up. And I know that area, San Antonio. I've been there, lived around that same area, so I'm very familiar with that building. Even I've driven by it many times. So it's very interesting with how those things have gone. So thankfully the guy is dead now. That's good. It doesn't appear that there are any more package bombs out there, which is also good. And hopefully this is something that we can say is behind us.
But it's had a lot of people, because, stuff like Amazon, it's so easy now today just to order something and you have a package on your doorstep, you can get the next day.
Yeah.
Some places you can get it the same day. And especially for a city like Austin, which has, the new Amazon facility, people are getting Amazon packages all the time, but they have been afraid to open these packages when they arrive at their door now. I believe the police had received something like 1,000 suspicious package reports over the course of this last week. Everyone's on edge because it's really intrusive into a place where you feel like you want a sense of security and knowing what you're going to open the package, but these people don't know, and it turned out to be a bomb. So it's really unfortunate, and it's crazy that this happened, really. But do you want to move on?
Yeah, go ahead.
So yesterday, did you catch any of the March for Our Lives stuff?
Unfortunately, I did.
I watched some live streams of this for a bit. Yesterday, all across the country and across the world, actually, there was large-scale marches for gun control. They say, estimated in Washington, D.C. alone, there was 800,000 people out there, on Pennsylvania Avenue marching for gun control. And, gun control as a single issue in terms of voting has never really been that popular. On the right or the left, really. There's plenty of Democrats that care about gun rights. But this is really the first time I've seen a push for gun control that might actually have something behind it. You don't see rallies in the street like this to build a wall. You don't.
You see it for the Women's March, and
you
look
see
how that
it for the
turned out.
Women's March, and it's the same organizers who did the Women's March for this, but this is even bigger. 800,000 people marching is not anything to scoff at what they were able to achieve.
I will say that as we've said, they still are the minority right now. It's just an extremely enthusiastic vocal minority that isn't worried about getting out there.
But when we talked about voter enthusiasm, these people are all very enthused. These are people that will all go to the polls. They all talk about they're going to vote to take your guns away. And, you look at the signs that these people carry. It's
retarded.
Yeah, the only really true word that could describe it authentically is retarded. These people are extremely retarded. And they're extremely brazen with just saying, they always try to say, oh, we don't want to take your guns. We just want common sense, sensible gun control.
But that's exactly what they want, is to take your guns.
And then you also said the people in the crowd openly saying, like, I'm going to take your guns. I saw a picture just now looking on my phone of, a black woman with a sign that says, I wish Obama took your guns. I saw, another sign looking through Facebook today where someone had a sign that says, yes, we're coming to take your guns. You can keep your muskets. It's like, why should we've gotten to a point where people are marching to lose rights, to have less rights. And they truly believe that you can just take guns from people and gun violence goes away. I mean, to begin with, gun violence isn't an epidemic in this country whatsoever. And until this CDC omnibus study, I guess, goes full.
And even that might actually help our side.
Maybe, maybe not. But it's just so wishful thinking that these people live in a world where they don't own guns personally, so they just think everyone should live like them.
And then you got that bald-headed lesbian Latina bitch out there, you know, faking some tears for the camera and all this sort of stuff, wearing a Cuban flag on her, like, military-looking style jacket with ripped jeans, you know.
Is she Cuban?
Who, her?
Emma Gonzalez.
I don't fucking care. If she is, can we deport her?
I don't know.
Can we just deport all these people?
Did you see the one girl, I believe it was in Washington, D.C., where she was talking and she threw up while she was on stage?
No, I did not see that video.
That was rather humorous. It was...
Did she intend to throw up?
No.
Oh, good.
No, she was just in the middle of her speech and threw up.
That's hilarious. People can't take a little stage fright.
But, yeah, you know, we've been talking about this gun stuff ever since Parkland happened, pretty much every single week since then. And, I don't know. They are making their presence known, and they are very enthusiastic about taking your guns. I can't handle how self-righteous these stupid people are, because I wish that we were this self-righteous, and we should be. You know, people on the right, conservatives, Republicans, libertarians, whatever, in our minds we know that we're correct about things.
Yeah.
But we do not have any sort of passion or enthusiasm or self-righteousness to get things done and to change things for good like these leftists are. They have the right mindset on this. So...
And unfortunately, you know, the way things are structured right now, like, these people, you know, like we were saying, they're holding up signs calling the NRA a terrorist organization. I should just make a sign calling the DNC a terrorist organization. It have about the exact same amount of credibility. In fact, mine might actually be a little bit more credible than that. But, you know, let's also not kid ourselves here. The same people that showed up to the Women's March are the same people showing up to this, are the same people showing up to anti-Trump marches. It's the same group of that, you know, that very enthusiastic 20% of the country that is hardcore lefty, Democrat, socialist, communist, whatever you want to label it. That's what we're seeing here. That what we're hearing from is these people talking, these people showing up to different marches. Yeah, that's pretty much all I was going to say.
Let's move on to a school shooting incident that happened this week, though, that didn't really receive a lot of coverage.
No, and that was there was a school shooting that happened at Great Mills High School in Great Mills, Maryland this week. The shooting was actually stopped very quickly on Tuesday morning after a school resource officer exchanged gunfire with the attacker to end the threat. The shooter was identified as 17-year-old Austin Rollins, and he was killed by the resource officer, County Sheriff's Deputy Blaine Gaskill. The shooting injured the leg of one 14-year-old student and unfortunately claimed the life of a 16-year-old by the name of Jalen Wiley, who was injured in the shooting and was left brain dead, later taken off life support by her family on Thursday. So, you know, unfortunately, this is a school shooting. This counts as a school shooting.
Yeah.
But, you know, as we say before, we want people like these resource officers to be armed and trained to deal with this threat. You're never going to be able to stop an ambush. That's one thing the left is completely true about. You know, if someone decides to just randomly pull out a gun and stop shooting, they're going to fire off some shots. They're probably going to kill some people. Unfortunately, there really isn't too much you're going to be able to do to stop that from happening, especially if you already are trying to enforce the laws that you have on the books right now. What you want is people that are there that are going to be able to put down the threat once it begins, which in this case is exactly what happened. The 14-year-old that got shot in the leg, he got released from hospital later that day. Unfortunately, he got shot, and unfortunately, one person was killed. But imagine if that guy wasn't there to stop the shooting. How many more people could have been shot? How many more people could have been killed? You know, instead of, you know, complaining about the fact that, you know, this happened, which, granted, I'm not happy about the fact that this happened. It's a very sad and terrible thing that happened. But it does prove us right, that when you have people there that are trained and armed to deal with this threat, the level and amount of casualties is significantly lower. And like you said, they're not even talking about this on the TV at all. You know, after about a day of it happening, it was out of the news.
Because it wouldn't have looked good alongside this, you know, March for Our Lives. Because these people don't want guns in the schools either.
Yeah, these are the same people out there saying disarm the cops, disarm the police.
Yeah, so.
These are the same people saying get rid of the U.S. border with Mexico. It's the same people.
But But yeah, it's unfortunate what happened there, but thankfully they're able to meet the shooter with force to prevent even more loss of life. And that's what you have to do in these situations. We can't pretend that they're just going to go away because we pass some sort of law. These things will happen in the future. The only way to stop it is to meet, someone exerting force with equal force. And that's shooting them. So let's move on to a poll that I wanted to talk about this week. The Monmouth University Polling Institute did a little survey over the existence of a deep state. No less than 74% of Americans believe in a deep state when it is described as a collection of unelected officials running policy. Only 21% do not believe this kind of group exists. What is even more surprising, though, is that the poll found that 7 out of 10 Americans polled in each political group, not just Republicans, but Democrats and independents as well, believe in the existence of a deep state. 31% of Republicans and 33% of independents believe a deep state definitely exists. Only 19% of Democrats believe that a deep state definitely exists. So, I believe the issue of deep states has been brought up on this program at times. So we haven't gotten too, pardon the pun, deep into the subject. But, this poll really shows a big change, in the minds of the American public on how the country is actually run. The majority of people, when described that it's a collective of, unelected people pushing policy, do believe that there is a deep state. And, Rand Paul was on the news this week. I forget which show he was on. Oh, no, he was on Laura Ingraham. I was listening to it. He even himself said, yes, there is a deep state that is preventing us, from doing what we want to do in the Trump administration. I think it needs to be more even common knowledge that people understand the existence of a deep state beyond when you have to define it to them as the collective of individuals running policy that are unelected. But do you have any thoughts on this polling body?
I would just say it's elected people that are part of it as well. It's not just the unelected. But it's very interesting that, it's not something that's too much of a political divide. It's pretty much across the board. Roughly 7 in 10 in each political group believe it, even though, Republicans and independents tend to believe it definitely exists more than the Democrats do. But Democrats, sure enough, still do believe that it exists. I just want to ask, the 20% of people that believe it doesn't exist, why don't you think it exists? Do you have any evidence or justification for believing that? Because I think anyone that actually kind of pays attention and looks at this sort of stuff is going to obviously say, yeah, there's a group of unelected bureaucrats in this country that are trying to run policy and maybe even running policy.
Now,
it's pretty clear to anyone that pays attention to it.
Now, also what came out of this poll, though, is some numbers that aren't so promising about that. So 63% said that they were not familiar with the term deep state themselves. 13% that they are very familiar, and 24% said that they are somewhat familiar. So even, and that's why they had to, break it down to a definition beyond just the word deep state.
Right.
I think people get a sense of this is how America runs. They just don't have, a name for it. They don't have a conception of it necessarily, which is why it needs to be really fleshed out. And I don't know, maybe at a different point in time in the future we can do kind of an extensive talk about what is the deep state, what is their influence, and what they're doing.
I would love to do a midweek on that if you have the time.
It would be good, yeah. But I think the majority of people that listen to this program have an understanding of what the deep state is, and there's more people out there in the country than you think that actually agree with you.
In those numbers that you're going over, the 63% that are not familiar with the term, 13% very familiar, 24% somewhat familiar, I would love to see the breakdown by party of even that. Just to see, I would tend to think that Republicans more so than Democrats would be in the very familiar category, But that's just one of those things where if I could find that information, if they have maybe a PDF file, I'm going to check that and actually see what it says. But other than that, I mean, I don't really have anything else to say regarding the deep state.
Let's move on to this last story that we have for the national news, which I guess this could also be considered international, but this is an American saying it, so that's why I put it at the end here. And that is a top U.S. general says that American troops should be ready to die for Israel. Earlier this month, in the midst of the 9th annual 12-day joint exercise named Juniper Cobra, which was hailed in Israeli media as the largest of its kind, simulating a battle on 3 fronts. The 3 fronts would be Syria, Lebanon, and Gaza. U.S. 3rd Air Force Commander Lieutenant General Richard Clark spelled out just a scenario in which U.S. troops could be asked to fight and die for the defense of Israel, even to the point of being placed under Israeli commanders responsible for battlefield decision-making. While major joint military exercises involving significant troop deployments are nothing new to the U.S. and its allies, Lieutenant General Clark's words to Israeli media are truly precedent-setting and shocking. So, you know, on this show we've gone over many times, we're not the biggest fans of Israel and what the Israelis get involved with, and we don't think that they're a positive influence on the United States. And it's gotten to the point where, you know, people buy into this BS around Israel, that we have people in our military that are willing to let American troops die for Israel, not their own country. A foreign country. A foreign country that uses taxpayer dollars.
Yeah, that just got another, what was it, 1.3 billion?
Yeah.
On top of what they're already getting, which is around 5 billion a year, more than any other country that we give money to.
Yeah, in terms of aid.
What do we get from that? Meddling in our elections?
And on top of that, now we have generals promising, you know.
Suggesting.
Or suggesting.
Which is pretty much promising.
In the case that there would be, you know, new fighting along any of these fronts, which, you know, there's been talks recently that maybe a war might break up with Lebanon again recently. But I don't think any movement's coming on that. But with how Israel's been so involved with Syria, especially lately, bombing indiscriminately all the time in Syria, as though, you know, maybe there's a bit of side tangent, but, you know, recently we've been seeing a lot of airstrikes into Syria by the Israelis saying, oh, Iran is establishing a presence in Syria. We need to counteract this. Iran was invited to fight in Syria by the President Bashar al-Assad. Okay, the Israelis have no respect for international, or, you know, national sovereignty whatsoever. And yet these are the people that we shouldn't trust our troops to in, you know, the case of war. It's insane, but this is the stuff that some people are saying.
Yeah.
Very, very scary stuff, though. Do you want to move on to some current year college craziness?
Yeah, let's go ahead and let's do it.
Okay, let's get into that.
The racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic. You're fucking a white male!
The assumption that women are naturally better caregivers is part of patriarchy.
Die, cis, scum.
You will not divide us! You will not divide us! You will not divide us! You will not divide us!
It's time for some current year college craziness.
Current year college craziness, segment of the show where we talk about the crazy stuff happening on college campuses here and abroad, but predominantly here because we got the best crazy colleges in the world. And the first crazy college we want to go to is in Minnesota.
Yeah, so St. Catherine's University in St. Paul, Minnesota has canceled a leadership conference because too many of the speakers were white. The university released a statement saying, quote, "We did not feel the list of speakers adequately represented the St. Kate's community or fulfilled the objective of lifting up the voices of all women. While this was a tough decision, we believe it was an important one." The The university president, Becky Roloff, said, quote, "We did not set a goal to secure a diverse panel of presenters. Because of this, the racial and ethnic diversity of women in leadership positions was not reflected in the conference," and she expressed her sincere apology for the injuries that were caused. John Hindendaker, president of the Minneapolis-based Center of the American Experiment, said, quote, "It's really almost comical that they were forced to admit that they did this strictly on the basis of merit, and they characterized this as a mistake. It's really kind of a classic story of how everything gets sacrificed in the name of diversity." So what do you think, Enzo? Are you happy that the leadership conference got canceled because too many of the speakers were white? We did not have enough black, brown, and people of color up there? Not enough transgenders up there?
So, I'm originally from Wisconsin, and my mom at a time and point even lived in the Twin Cities. I've been in Minnesota many times, and the thing is, like, Minnesota's more than 90% white. So, you know, the speakers being overwhelmingly white, how is that not indicative of St. Paul, Minnesota itself, though? That's my thing. Like, they're talking about they need to uplift the voices of all women, but
white women are still women.
White women are also part of that all. And they're a vast majority of it. I just find it so strange that these people get offended by, like, actual representations of their own community. Like, they want to create a community that doesn't actually exist. And when you talk about Minneapolis and, you know, St. Paul, the Twin Cities, they have all those Somali refugees that have moved to the area in the hundreds of thousands at this point. And those are the people that they want leading the leadership conventions or conferences or whatever. They don't want white people rising up to that level. And why is that? Why are white people not worthy enough to be leaders?
Especially when they're 90% of whatever state that they're in.
Yeah. So it's kind of confusing in that aspect. Let's go to the next story.
So the next story that we have up also has to deal with the Catholic University, this time in Massachusetts. The College of the Holy Cross in Worcester, Massachusetts, announced that they will be dropping their knight mascot and imagery to avoid ties to the Crusades. The school's president, Reverend Philip Burrows, said in a letter, quote, "The visual depiction of a knight, in conjunction with the moniker Crusader, inevitably ties us directly to the reality of the religious wars and the violence of the Crusades. This imagery stands in contrast to our stated values. Over the coming months, the college will gradually phase out the use of all knight-related imagery." So they're dropping the knight-related imagery because of the Crusades. If anything, we need another crusade, not to get rid of the imagery from the last ones.
It's so weird that they'd even be sensitive about the Crusades, though. The Crusades are an event that happened hundreds of years ago. Hundreds of years ago.
But violence, Enzo.
It's always, and I'm not religious at all, but the whole, oh, you can't complain about Islamic terrorism because look at what the Christians have done. Look at the Crusades. Like, the Crusades aren't something that the Christians started. The Crusades started because Muslims were invading Europe and they had to push them back. You know, look at the Battle of Vienna. The Muslims got all the way to the gates of Vienna in Austria. They got pretty goddamn far. They're fighting Muslims in goddamn Poland. And yet, it's the Christians that have to feel ashamed about the Crusades. They were just, you know, reciprocating the violence.
But anyways, not good. Not good in that regard. I guess we can move from Massachusetts down to Pennsylvania with an update from the story that we talked about last week. And that is that, remember that student that got kicked out of class for mansplaining?
Yeah.
He's back in the class. Student Lake Ingle of Indiana University of Pennsylvania, who was kicked out of class earlier this month for saying that there are only two genders and that the gender wage gap wasn't real, has been allowed back into class. IUP President Michael Driscoll announced that he would be going against feminist professor Allison Downey's controversial requests to remove the student from class. Ingle was supposed to receive a ruling from the Academic Integrity Board on Monday, but Driscoll said that he paused the formal process indefinitely without any consideration from the AIUP. IB's ruling. Engel considers his 18-day exile a victory, saying, quote, "I'm happy I can get back to class and graduate on time. I was surprised the president stepped in before the ruling, but glad that he made the right choice." So this is a win, you know. It seemed that was a really bad story regarding him getting kicked out of class. We talked about it.
We talked about this last week, didn't we?
Yeah, this was last week on the show. So, figured we might as well have the update. He's been let back into class. It doesn't look like he's going to get in trouble. And all we have is just a few triggered feminists.
Well, that's good.
And you know what the triggered feminists decide to do in response? They show up to some march in D.C. Same group of people, ladies and gentlemen. So, that's really all we have for that update. So glad he's back in class. You want to move to the next story?
Yeah, let's go to the next story.
So the next story is back to Massachusetts, this time at an all-women's college, and that is Mount Holyoke. An all-women's college in Massachusetts is telling its professors to not say women in the classroom, but instead to say students. As part of the Teaching and Learning Initiative, professors are instructed to say, quote, Mount Holyoke students instead of Mount Holyoke women, as well as avoiding statements like, we're all women here, or referring to the two genders. Acting University President Sonia Stevens doubled down, saying, quote, as we know, not every Mount Holyoke student identifies as a woman, but every student at Mount Holyoke has the right to live and learn in an inclusive environment that is free from hostility and is respectful of their identity. The college now wants professors to take an intersectional approach to the classroom by, quote, becoming aware of the multiple forms of oppression and privilege each individual faces and how they interact with one another. This is all thanks to their gender inclusion task force that created the Supporting Trans and Non-Binary Students Guide. At Mount Holyoke, any biologically born female can apply for admission, but only a biologically born male who identifies as other, they, z, and when other/they identity includes woman, and one who identifies as a woman may apply. So, a mouthful, but...
The weird thing for me is they're talking about every student at Mount Holyoke has the right to live and learn in an inclusive environment, but it's a segregated college. Like, that's the opposite of inclusive. They're excluding half of the population.
Yeah.
But, you gotta be inclusive to the trannies because they're extremely oppressed. They can't be in the military anymore.
All you have to do is be biologically born female. So if you're a transgender female to man, I suppose that you can still go. And I guess
as long as you don't identify as male.
Yeah, and a biologically born female who I guess identifies as a woman, that applies too.
But
so.
they won't even call the students women at a women's college because of fear of being discriminatory, even when the school is discriminatory. It's a level of stupidity only possible with really smart people.
Isn't it amazing how much our lives have to be affected by something that's less than 1/3% of the population?
Yeah, the push on the trans stuff is insane. I would have never imagined 10 years ago, the stuff about transsexual or transgenderism and transsexualism be anywhere where it is at this point. But things are bad.
And it's also interesting. Maybe it appears that those people that said it was a slippery slope, maybe they were right.
Yeah, and that's a little transition to our last story for Career College Craziness, which I have, which is at Providence College. A student RA at Providence College, a Catholic university in Rhode Island, has been subject to harassment by classmates, including a threat of rape, after creating a bulletin board display advocating for traditional marriage. The display he created has since been vandalized and removed. It had featured quotes from Pope Francis and biblical scriptures about marriage and was titled "Marriage, the Way God Intended It." Students assembled threateningly outside his dorm to the point where campus police had to escort him away out of concern for his safety. The student RA, Michael Smolaskas, said, quote, I couldn't even go brush my teeth for several nights without facing a mob in my hallway. There had been a pro-lesbian bulletin board put up for the entire month of February in one of the female residency halls, he continued, adding that, quote, nobody was riding outside the girl's door. He later returned to find a cartoon drawn in the bathroom depicting him graphically being raped by another male. A spokesman for the college said that, quote, this series of incidences is under investigation, adding that the school, quote, will not comment on the situation while the investigation is ongoing.
So you know what? You can't even advocate for traditional marriage. That's how far it's come.
Yeah.
It's one thing to say, I support gay marriage, or to be out there advocating for it. But to the point when you're attacking someone who advocates for traditional marriage, quite literally almost attacking the guy. I mean, they're standing outside of his dorm threateningly. He can't go to the bathroom without people, getting in his way, shoving and pushing and whatnot.
And the guy isn't advocating for even the repealing of gay marriage.
No.
Which, gay marriage as it is it's crazy that they could even interpret gay marriage of the Constitution that they did. When they put this stuff to vote, even in California, gay marriage didn't pass. Mm-hmm. But, they found a way. To the living document of the Constitution. But, yeah, it's crazy that, a student can be bullied in such a fashion, and these people feel so justified to do it because he advocated for something that, didn't put the LGBT community first.
Mm-mm.
So, crazy stuff on that. But yeah, that's current year college craziness for the week. We just got one segment left, international, and we only have 3 stories out of Europe, so we're going to be done pretty soon here.
Yeah, I like these shorter episodes. We've gotten a lot of positive comments regarding having episodes be a little bit shorter than they used to be, so...
Yeah, we'll try to continue to keep these things short and to the point. But the first story that we're going to get into as far as Europe is Count Dankula.
Yeah. Scottish YouTuber Count Dankula was found guilty Tuesday of a hate crime and faces a potential 2-month prison sentence after posting a video of his girlfriend's dog doing Nazi salutes. Count Dankula was found guilty of being, quote, grossly offensive and was released on bail, but will return to court on April 23rd for sentencing. His girlfriend's dog was taught to raise its paw for a treat, and the girlfriend said the dog would raise its paw for anything people said if it was given that treat. Count Dankula filmed the dog raising its paw while saying different anti-Semitic remarks.
What they're saying there is he has the video of him doing this to the dog.
Hilarious video.
He says to the dog, do you want to gas the Jews? And the dog gets all excited. And the dog has no idea what he's saying. And he just did it as a joke. He wanted to turn his girlfriend's dog into a Nazi. But, now jokes can send you to jail in the United Kingdom. And the guy, isn't, a Nazi. He's not a racist. He's just a guy that did a joke that didn't harm anyone. But, apparently it was still grossly offensive to the point where he needs to go to jail.
Literally for a hate crime. Not even any other crimes, but for a hate crime alone.
It's a hate crime against nobody, though. There's no victim of him or his actions.
But the victim was society.
Yeah.
That's why you going 1 mile an hour over the speed limit is dangerous, and you need to pay us $200.
Yeah.
I'm against speed limits, but it's crazy though. You talk about the fact that the United Kingdom does not have free speech.
No.
We need to remember that. The United Kingdom, a lot of Europe, does not have free speech, which is really unfortunate because, we talk about, the Iraq War, the Afghanistan War. We're bringing these people freedom. We're bringing these people democracy. If you're going to be invading any countries to try to bring them freedom and democracy, it might as well be the United Kingdom in Europe. I mean, let's face it. You do a lot better going over there and trying to, give them the same freedoms we have here. Maybe those places wouldn't be in the bad situations they were if they would have actually done that. But
yeah,
nonetheless.
Let's go on to the next story that also is in the United Kingdom.
And again, the craziness that is the United Kingdom. An Islamic teacher who sexually abused a girl has been spared from jail. The reason will shock you. An Islamic teacher in the UK, 40-year-old Suleiman McNojoya, has been spared from jail time because his wife doesn't speak English. Suleiman had reportedly had repeatedly molested an 11-year-old girl and tried to teach her the Quran. He repeatedly rubbed the girl's leg and reached under her headscarf to touch her chest. He claimed that the touching was done to reassure the girl. Anyways, he was convicted of 5 counts of sexual activity, but was able to escape with a 40-week prison sentence, which is suspended for 2 years. Why? Because he's the father of 6, and his family is dependent on him, and he's ill with kidney problems. His wife doesn't speak English, so it would cause an undue burden on the family and their 6 kids if he had to go to jail.
I'm fine with the burden to your family. If you didn't want this happening, maybe you shouldn't have been sexually abusing
Your
someone.
family deserves to be burdened.
Okay, your wife doesn't speak the language. That's kind of her fault. You have all these kids. Hey, maybe the state can take care of them. At least they won't be in the custody of a sexual predator.
Mm-hmm.
But, they just get away with this stuff. We talked about Telford last week and how that relates to Rotterdam. There's huge problems with Muslims sexually abusing British children. And it goes completely quiet over there because of the fear of these hate crime laws. We wouldn't even be able to talk about it to the degree that we do on this show if we lived in the United Kingdom. So,
if we were in the United Kingdom, you and I would already be in jail.
Probably. Let's go to the last story, though, and this is out of France.
Yeah. Unfortunately, still has to do with Muslims. A 25-year-old attacker in France went on a rampage on Friday, hijacking a car and killing 3 people before opening fire on police and taking hostages inside a supermarket. The attacker claimed allegiance to ISIS, who then later claimed responsibility for the attack. In total, 16 people were injured. A police officer, Colonel Arnaud Beltrame, volunteered to take the place of a female hostage and left his cell phone on so police outside could hear what was going on inside the supermarket. Colonel Beltrame was shot by the attacker and succumbed to his wounds, and French President Macron has said that he will be receiving a national tribute. The attacker was ID'd as Radouana Lakdim and has been under surveillance since 2014, but apparently showed no warning signs, according to the prosecutors. So, they always talk about these people are, we have this estimated number of people that live in our countries that might be potential attackers. We have this list of people who we're surveilling. We don't think there are no warning signs. And here you go. 3 people dead, 16 people injured, including police officer.
Radulana Lakdim doesn't strike me as a very French name.
No, it doesn't, does it?
Which makes you wonder, why did the guy come to France? Why did they let this guy in? Why did he need to come? If he's just going to end up, killing people.
It does sound like a French name, though?
What?
Arnaud Beltrame.
Yeah. And he's dead.
Yeah.
So, more bad stuff with France. Yeah. The situation doesn't seem to have an end.
Not, we always like to try to end the episode with a high note, but this has been such a bad week.
Yeah,
there's really no way to end with a high note.
It's been a very down week. Hopefully I feel better next week.
I will say one thing. It seems like whenever there are bad weeks, there's also good weeks. There's good weeks that, next week we could be saying this was one of the best weeks ever. Who knows?
Yeah.
It's just back and forth the way things go. But you know what, Enzo? Like you said, this will be the last time that you and I are live in person for at least the next couple of months since you'll be out of state.
Yep.
But, other than that, we're still going to do the show. We're still going to record it. It probably won't be recorded live, although we're going to test that out. Just, we might test that to see how it goes, maybe not. But other than that...
But we'll still, as always, have the audio that goes to the RSS feed every single week.
And, we're not going to be exactly sure how busy you'll be, but, I would like to try to get a couple midweeks since we haven't really done one since, January.
Yeah, quite a while.
People have been asking where our midweeks are going, so,
yeah.
We're going to try to have more of those. I would like to do, as you said, do one on the deep state. That would be interesting to do.
That would be a good topic. Before we go, I just wanted to do my kind of usual call to action, and if you like the show, you enjoyed the show, I just ask that you turn the show on to one other person. Recommend the show to one other person. I've received feedback of people that have done so, and, usually when it's turned on to someone, they, show the show to maybe someone who's not even that sympathetic to Donald Trump, and they still feel that they've learned a lot. So, yeah, just turn the show on to one person. That's all I ask.
And I would just like to say that, we still are on our social media accounts. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/TrumpRepublicRadio. You can find us on Gab at Trump_Republic_radio. We'll be posting links to, those in the description like we do. But everything else, I would just have to say, Enzo, have a safe trip when you're up there. I know you're going to have a blast doing whatever you do when you're up there. So, this is definitely not the end of the show. However, you and me together in the same room for at least the next couple months.
Yeah.
So, have a fun time when you're there.
Yeah, most definitely. So with that said, thank you for listening to Trump Public Radio, and have a good one.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.